Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to part 2 of week 4 of the Future History Project. And we will be dealing with 3 more stories this time. A little bit of a reversal of what's been happening for the last couple of weeks, but the reason is that earlier in the week we finished up with the 2 Powell and Donovan stories, and then now we're getting into the Susan Calvin stories, and so hence the reversal 3. For the second part. And we are dealing with Liar, Satisfaction Guaranteed, and Lenny. Liar was first published in 1941, May of 1941, in Astounding Science Fiction. I believe it was Asimov's third robot story. And it has to do with Herbie, RB 3, I think it is, RB 34. And again, he uses there's serial numbers, sort of, or numbers for them, but they translate that into a somewhat sort of name, like RB, Herbie, but this robot is a bit unique, that's come off the line of U.S. robots and mechanical men, who manufacture all the robots, and they have a whole team of roboticists, as well as Susan Calvin, who is a robo-psychologist, and she's unique. She's the only one there is. And this Herbie can read minds, which has sort of shocked many of them, so she's gone to investigate. And we learn quite a bit about her in a sort of two-dimensional, maybe 2.5-dimensional way. She's not the most rounded character, for sure. Especially in this one, it's either sort of so it is really two-dimensional. It's sort of like the light switch on, light switch off, in a sense. But we learn that she is lonely. She is aging. She's getting up in her middle age, and she is the talk of everyone. She's very brisk. She's good at what she does, but, you don't cross her. She's got her own ideas, and she forcefully. And the story was written clearly during time with a lot of male chauvinism, and you can see that in the other characters as well, the male characters, the way they talk about her. But she is, it's pretty clear that she's lonely. She does not have a partner in any shape or form. Her life has been robots. But she is sort of, she's attracted to other colleagues, and there's one colleague she is attracted to. And Herbie knows this because he can read her mind. So he invents this story to say that her colleague is actually infatuated with her as well, because he can read his mind. So she starts feeling good about herself, and thinking, well, there might still be, a chance with things, because she's enamored of him, and according to Herbie, so is he of her. So she starts wearing makeup a little bit, and inexpertly, and that becomes a bit of a talk as well. But she, as she's investigating Herbie as well, and she's really thanking him and everything like this, there's another roboticist that comes in. He's younger, he's ambitious, and he's trying to figure out what has happened, and he's told by his boss, well, Herbie is an expert at mathematics. So he goes in and realizes, Herbie saying, well, I don't really understand all this. Herbie likes reading, he reads the technical manuals and the mathematics stuff, but he understands things to a certain extent, but he likes reading novels. He likes reading sort of romance novels. And hence, he realizes that, humans need this romantic interaction. Hence his story to Susan. But it goes a little deeper than that, because the roboticist who's trying to figure all this out, is, as I say, is ambitious. So he wants, he's getting pressure from above his boss. But then Herbie tells him, well, his boss is already, retired, and you're going to be the next in line for this. You are going to be promoted. So he's feeling good. So he feels, a bit of a power rush there. And he has confrontation with his boss, who he says, well, you're on your way out anyway, so, who cares what you think, basically. So they go in and confront Herbie about this, because he tells him, well, Herbie has told me this. And, and they're finding these inconsistencies in these stories. But meanwhile, Susan has already found out that the person that has apparently got that infatuation about her is getting married to somebody else. So she realized Herbie has lied to her, hence the title, Liar. So she's in there confronting Herbie. She's getting quite emotional about this. And the other two walk in arguing, and they confront Herbie and say, didn't you tell me that he was retiring? And it's like, and all this kind of stuff. So Herbie is silent. Meanwhile, Susan's sort of watching all this and realizes what's happened, that the glitch, because it's another one of these with the 3 laws of robotics. What would happen if this happens, if you have a robot that can read minds. And the first law says a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. So the robot, by reading minds, realized that there's distress in the person, like a psychological distress. So he creates this lie, makes him feel better, so he's doing this. And but then when he's confronted by both of them, or all three, and told, tell me that you told me this, say this to my boss. But the second law says a robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. So he becomes silent. He can't do this because it's a confliction there. But then Susan sets up and saying, well, you've got to do this, but if you do this, then you can't do this. But you got to do this because you can't do this. And she keeps repeating that over and over and over again. And Herbie sort of, his positronic brain just goes into it just fries itself because it's in a loop. And he effectively dies. He becomes catatonic. The 2 male colleagues leave, and Susan is quite bitterly angry. She's done this, revenge because of the lying that has happened. And the last line in the story, liar. She says to the robot body. So, and as I say, it's like, she's a robo-psychologist, but she probably could use some therapy, as well. The second story is Satisfaction Guaranteed. And we've already sort of saw the U.S. Robots and Mechanical Men with AL 370 Goes Astray, which AL 76 Goes Astray, AL. And robots weren't allowed to be on Earth. But in this story, a Satisfaction Guarantee, there is, they can now test that. Well, it's still sort of illegal, but they're working on this and changing things a little bit. But they've got an android, a humanoid one, that they want to test out, and with real life, real humans, and see how this works. And one of the roboticists has a wife, and he decides, well, yeah, they can test it there, and he's going away for a little while. He'll be away for about 6 weeks, I think it is. And Tony TN robot will go in and be sort of a butler type, clean the house and do everything, but he can't go outside, but the roboticist's wife, she's sort of unfulfilled. She's not too happy with her life, because she feels her husband doesn't think that she's living up to things of social contact with others, like keeping up with the Joneses in a sense, and so she feels fairly lonely. Tony realizes this, so he subtly, as this, what it says, makes love to her in the sense of, makes her feel good, and says that, well, let's make have a makeover of the house, and also as a makeover of her, so she can bring in friends and everything like this. And she, first of all, she's horrified by the fact that it's a robot. Uh, but she begins to confide in Tony so much, and psychologically he's helping her, and she's growing very close to him. And it comes time to, after the house is all redone and she's all dressed up and everything, they're going to have a party with all these snooty society people that come. And just as they are at the door, Tony opens up all the curtains. It's at night, and grabs her in his arms and kisses her. So everybody sees this, that she's got a lover, and they're impressed. And it gets her, self-esteem really high. But then she's conflicted with this, because it's a robot. It's not real. It's not human, and she's married as well. So, the robot is taken away, because this at the time the experiment is over, and when Tony's back at U.S. Robots and Mechanical Men, Susan Calvin is again talking, because she's set this all up, and she realized, and they all realized that they read the report from Tony that it was a failure, because they're saying we can't have robots going around falling in love with humans. But then she's saying, well, that's not really the issue. It's because the issue is the woman has fallen in love with the robot, because of her loneliness. But again, it's with this, with regard to the laws of robotics, that Tony saw the distress and helped her and did this. But it's sort of, it's again one of these stories that the laws of robotics are pretty clear. But then what happens when you get in subtle human quirks? How does the robot interpret and use the robotics, the laws of robotics? So it's Asimov exploring these issues and problems through the short stories, and we do see progression with things, because things are learned about robots and the laws, and can be sort of tweaked. But then now we go to Lenny. It's LN series. I think it's just LN, but his name is Lenny. And it starts out the story with U.S. Robotics have are allowing 1 day a week the tourists come in to see everything. And they don't like that, because it stops everything for the day. People are sort of horrified because now robots are being able to be being are put together and tested on Earth, but there's still a lot of issues with this. People are scared, and you can see that where the children pull back their children when a robot comes up and wants to shake hands and say, hello, I'm so and so, and people are very scared of this still. But there's, while this happens, all the machines are supposed to be locked down, so nothing's really happening. But somebody screws up and doesn't lock down their control board, and a 16-year-old boy comes along and starts banging at the sort of keyboard, entry thing, and it changes one of the robots, and it changes Lenny. and this was supposed to be a new series of robots that would mine boron in the asteroids and be specific to mining in boron. But he comes out sort of addled, and he's like a child. He's like a baby. He can't even speak. He's got baby speech. And they realize, but they don't know what's happened there. They don't know what's happened. And so this is, he's given to Susan Calvin to sort of try to figure this out. The other roboticists are trying to figure out what's happened in the pathways. And again, we learned something about Susan Calvin because of her loneliness, and she's aging. She's got gray hair, and she starts working with the robot, and she treats it like a baby, and so she starts. The robot learns a few words, but they're trying to keep this quiet. And everything like that, but one of the other younger roboticists sort of breaks in because there's a pool going around, or a bet saying that that Susan has taught the robot how to speak, and the others are saying no. So he breaks in, and the robot Lenny breaks his arm, so he's harmed a human, and that. That he's broken the laws of robotics right there, or they think he has. So they don't know what's going to happen. It's going to, destroy U.S. robots and mechanical men. The whole point of having this open day type thing for tourists was to try to get people, in for being new roboticists, because they need expertise, but nobody wants to. So they were trying to open it up and show, what happened. So they're afraid that this is going to be, even worse for their thing. But Susan sort of has realized that what has happened is that the robot doesn't know its own strength, and she finds out that the young roboticist provoked the robot to try to get him speak, and went to hit the robot. So because the robot protects itself, brushed his hand away, but brushed it away a little too hard, not realizing his own strength because he's a baby or a toddler at this point. And Susan sort of realizes, well, wait a minute, let's not hide this. Tell it, and then we'll move all our operations for testing the robots onto the moon. And let's put it this way, that because you've been trying to get people to work for the company by saying it's all this and all safe and everything like this. Have a little bit of mystery in it, and problem solving and danger, especially being on the moon, and a robot that could malfunction, and they're convinced that they will actually then get people that are more adventurous to come in to the business. But they also find out, she wants to keep the robot a little longer to learn more, find out what's happening. And she's also found out that because of the pathways, why have a robot because she's actually building up sort of the mentality of the robot, but she realizes that because he's so degraded, she can only bring Lenny up so far. But she says, let's maybe not have a robot that's specific for boron, because once we have it for boron, we can't use them for anything else. Like if they want to mine iron, or she doesn't use iron, but for instance another ore, it won't be able to do it. So let's have a robot that has a clean template that can learn. And so that's the outcome of that as well. So they've learned something again from this, but at the same time she's talking to her colleagues and her boss, like the robot is calling, and what the robot is actually calling and saying "mummy" to her. So she's basically taught the robot to refer to her as "mummy," as his mother, and she gets a sort of rattle for the robot. It's a bit silly in some ways, but because I always like these, but I'm sort of reading it now with a little different eye, I guess, and I'm beginning to see some of the faults. But I can understand what Asimov is doing, and it's done well, and he's building up a picture of Susan Calvin, especially because she is lonely. She doesn't have children. Her children are the robots, and so, but sometimes it's heavy handed, I should say, at times when Asimov does this. But it is a short story, so short stories sometimes have to be heavy handed, and the payoff, sort of a payoff at the end. Um, and I really enjoy those. That was published. I didn't mention. I don't think that was published in January 1958 through Infinity Science Fiction, and Satisfaction Guarantee was 1951. Amazing stories. I'll put that all down in the description. But yeah, that's the first three Susan Calvin stories, and we got more next week. I'm going to have a little discussion tomorrow when I'm talking about next week's stories regarding Susan Calvin in general, and a few other things. But I wanted to sort of end up this one is that these stories had been, there were dramatizations of it, I should say. The Liar and Satisfaction Guarantee. Liar was done on a radio broadcast in the late 50s as a drama, but also in the 60s on the BBC there was there was a science fiction show called Out of the Unknown, and here's all the shows that are left over. Now, there's Asimov in here, there's all sorts of writers, but Liar and Satisfaction Guaranteed were made into episodes on this, but they've been wiped. They wiped the tapes sometime in the 70s, and there's only a few minutes and some stills that are left over, sadly, from those. And that'll be in here. I've yet to actually watch this to see, but there's discussion about it. All the lost ones. There's Ray Bradbury. There's even a Simak story in there, but a lot of them have been wiped, and there's only a few left. But also too, the Satisfaction Guaranteed, and I think it was Lenny, were there was a film. There was option for a film, I, Robot, and Harlan Ellison wrote a screenplay. I'll be discussing that at some other date once we get sort of done the I guess Susan Calvin stories, because they'll be they're the ones that are mostly in iRobot. So I'll be discussing those on or that screenplay separately. It was never filmed, but he combined some of the stories and into the script. And again, there's been other adaptations. In the 2000s, there was BBC Radio had done some adaptations for iRobot and other stories. There was like a Russian adaptation, because Asimov did become quite popular in Russia, and other short sort of films. But a lot of the stuff is lost, I think. But it's interesting that it has gone on, and it has been recognized as important robot stories and entertaining stories as well. Even though, as I say, it's a little heavy-handed at times with her in Liar, showing her her loneliness, and then her instinct for motherhood in Lenny. Because she's but also too it's a product of the time, because Asimov was showing that women, she's holding a very powerful position in this company, and she's got at the same time all this animosity from the male workers and everything like that. But she is dedicated. She's just fully dedicated to her work. And nothing else. It's sort of like Asimov himself. In some ways, I think that Susan Calvin is a bit like him, in a sense where writing was everything. Robots are everything for Susan Calvin. And yeah, they're just I think they're marvelous stories. And as I say, tomorrow I'll talk a little more into this. I'll just say one last thing about the continuity and timeline for this, because it doesn't quite work, like even within Asimov, because he was writing these ad hoc, so things don't quite match up all the time. For instance, in one of the stories, Susan Calvin, I think they even mentioned that she's graying, and she says it's 50 years after the Second World War. Okay? But she was supposed to have been born in 1982. So you can figure that out. That doesn't quite work. And also, to the aspect of changing from, having robots outlawed on Earth and onto the moon. It's there, but it's very hazy. The timeline, and the order of the stories are more or less what Asimov put them down as. Even though, as I say, one story, and if you read closely, you sort of realize, wait a minute, that doesn't fit in with, it doesn't go one after the other. But so be it. It's sort of, it's more of a progression of the evolution of robotics and robot that is more important in these stories, of how they're working out the kinks and the issues that arise from the laws of three laws of robotics, and that continues all the way through, as we'll see. Until it actually is worked out. So there's trial and error, and that's a lot of times what science and things are. Life is. It's a trial and error thing, and he's got this down. Rather than everything's perfect. There are problems, and we've got individual, humans, their own quirks and problems. As well as the robots have their own individual quirks and problems, and the dynamic of all those two, and how that affects the three laws of robotics, and how that affects each other, how that affects the humans, and how the humans affect the robots. It's all there, and sometimes not always explicit, but it is there. So anyway, I'll leave it there, and I'll be back tomorrow, as I say, with talking a little bit more about Susan Calvin and next week's stories. Take care, BookTube.